And for our next presentation, we are having Graham Williams with us, but Graham is not able to join us, I guess, live, because I cannot see him here, because of the power outages in South Africa. But we have his pre-recording, so strap in for a great recording of Graham Williams, an expert on story sharing and hosting story circles, and a master of linguistic and languages. So you're going to learn some things about hosting a story circle, and we will have a recorded Q&A. But if you have questions, guys, please write them to the chat, and I will pass them on to Graham. I think he will be glad to answer them via email. So let's have a watch.
So it's really great to be with you again, Artem. Thank you for asking me. I wanted to start by just explaining why I'm here and what I'm about. I know I'm here because you asked me, but there's more to it than that. In about 2005, I was quite busy as a business consultant traveling the world, and I got some cancer, and it took about 2 years to get through that with surgery and operations and that sort of stuff. But it was also a good time for me to wake up and to sit back and reflect and to realize that the values that have been driving me, if you like, my culture, were things like my position, my possessions, my power, my hedonistic pleasure, and striving for perfection. And during this time of thinking about that, I started to move towards, or to straddle, if you like, some different values, like a meaningful purpose, being present to people, having a personhood that was beyond ego, caring for the planet, and most of all, being other-oriented. So realizing that I'm not that important, and to be more connected to other people. And during this time, I also discovered that story was very much underused in the business world, and it was time to do something about that. So I've gravitated into using story a lot during my work, and in more recent years, using circles within stories can be told, little groups working literally in a circle. And I'd like to, just before starting, to share a poem that's become quite important to me. It was written by Rumi, and it goes something like this: love has taken away all my practices and filled me with poetry. That's how it begins. And the last two lines of the poem are, feel the motions of tenderness around you, the buoyancy. The poem is called Buoyancy, and it speaks to me because that line, love has taken away all my practices. I forget more and more about techniques and methodologies and processes and being clever, and realize that love is what helps us to be authentic and to connect. Filled me with poetry. That's a nice right-brained thing. And poetry is about beauty and about love and about meaning and so on. And to feel the motions of tenderness, it's like being relaxed and floating on the waves, and around you the buoyancy. those waves embrace you and lift you up and hold you up and enable you to cope with complexity. So I really liked that and wanted to share it with you. I think we have to think soul, we have to think companionship, we have to think from the same root word, compassion. And that's really what story is all about for me. Okay, so we're about to begin. Just to define some things initially, culture is how the collective thinks and feels and acts, what they relate to, believe in, share together, how they make their decisions, solve problems, challenges, how they change, what makes them tick, what are the underlying assumptions, values, rituals, symbols, behaviors. That's culture. Story is, of course, a way of sharing, making sense of things, inspiring, conveying insight. And it's a remarkable blend of art and science and mystique, and the way in which, through conversation, we can influence and shift culture. So that's really what storifying your culture is about. And I'm going to share with you specifically the process and dynamics of circle work, because circles are small groups of people who come together to share their stories and in that way move and change the culture that they are a part of. So we'll follow this sequence, a brief history of circles. What are the dynamics? How can it be applied in business? What are the most pressing needs today as I see it? And what are the special challenges in doing circle work? And I'll give you 10 tips. And then an invitation for those who want a book that covers this in a great more detail. So, first of all, the history of circles. Nothing new in this. We've had, since ancient times, the Knights of the Round Table were in a circle. In South Africa, we have something called Impi, which was Zulu warriors sitting around the fire and exchanging fears and stories of bravery and comforting each other and seeing each other through the battle ahead. Because circle work and stories, it's much more about expressing rather than impressing. And it's really about not seeing through the other person, but seeing the other person through. So we all know about Native American circles. We know about business circles, cafe table conversations. We have the Sufi sacred circle called Subet, which literally means conversation. We have people like Irvin Yalom, an eminent psychiatrist who pioneered circle work amongst his patients so that they could support each other. In Russia, I believe we have Matemateshki Krushki, I'm sure I pronounced that totally wrongly, which is about helping people to understand maths in schools and universities. And circle work is an integral part of a process that I use in business, which starts with a fast feedback loop survey, leads into an immersion in the topic, leads into the circle work. Some people call them anecdote circles, story circles, where people come together to explore and to share and to decide what work they're going to do to change the culture. And that's the way it goes. So we're talking about a small group of 8 to 10 people. We're not talking about a traditional meeting. Meetings are where people take minutes, but they can waste hours. Circles are where they feel in a safe place. They converse, they share at a deep level. Relationships are built, as well as the task getting done. And circles are found consistently achieve wonderful outcomes. And it sort of spans things like design thinking, open plan technology, appreciative inquiry. Those sort of happen naturally, if you like, during circle work. So here's an acronym that explains how circles work, or what defines them, or what is the culture of a circle, if you like. First of all, there's a safe, contained space. That's a unique social construct where people are heard, where collective intelligence is built, and where companionship happens. There's an incubator for the whole person, intellectual, social, emotional, spiritual even, and for the group and the emerging future that they are discussing and relating about. So there's a deeper relational thing that happens, which means that a circle is also a relationship builder. People discover not only others, but they discover themselves. And that's so important in shifting culture, deciding what you want to be part of, deciding on the higher meaning that you'd like to be part of. Conversing takes place also at a very deep level, and that fits very closely with David Boehm's dialogue process. It's a learning space, so there's knowledge, but there's also a systemic knowing that happens, and maturities happen. So at the whole person level, you also get the maturing of how people think, how they behave, how they feel, and that sort of stuff. People tend to wake up, grow up, clean up, and show up. The larger aspect is because of what is followed, what it follows. It's one of the truly remarkable outcomes is that people are literally enlarged. They grow. They grow growth mindsets. And from the circle, there's an outward rippling effect, like dropping a pebble in a pond, and the ripples just get wider and wider. So out of circle work, huge changes happen in the organization in which the circle has been working. I think I explained to you last time something about how I see story. Story obviously takes place within the circle that's working. And it's a step-by-step process, if you like, of preparing the topic, learning about the other person, learning about self, addressing unconscious biases, reaching out, engaging, holding a shared space together, and allowing for the almost supernatural to happen. That's the bridging process, the black line at the bottom. As that proceeds, the relationship status changes from stranger, from being antagonistic perhaps, from having totally different worldviews, to sharing and feeling felt and accepting the other and finding common ground, and if not totally agreeing, at least reaching the space where the conversation can continue. So I hope that explains in enough of an outline, circle work, and how stories take place within the circles that are being conducted. It's a wonderful process. I'm so conscious that I can just share so little of it here. But what might be helpful is to look at a couple of occasions where I've applied circle work. On the left-hand side was a situation where a business was involved in coaching and training and engaging with its customer base, its community, really almost on a pastoral basis. They found a huge obstacle in their current culture. So it was somewhat militaristic, hierarchical, controlling, that's the big red circle, and they wanted to shift it to a much smaller circle, as you can see on the right of the first picture. It was more than somewhat inflexible, not really open to new ideas, not open to change, and it lacked teamwork and genuine compassion, not only within the company, but also with its clients. So over time, through circle work, through meeting in circles to address carefully crafted questions that came out of the surveys that were done previously, asking them to consider things like, can you remember a time when? And both as a positive and as a negative, which explained different aspects of the culture that they had and wanted to move towards. And what resulted was they moved towards having more personal freedom, starting to work in an environment within where there was far less competition between people and much more cooperation, and becoming focused really on the community's best interests. So that was quite a good outcome in rather a short space of time. I think after about 3 months, they were well on the road to getting where they wanted to be. On the right-hand side was a multinational who wanted to produce good goods, good wealth, and good work, and escape from the poor way that they were handling sustainability. Now, within this organization, and we did 3 countries simultaneously, Kenya, Nigeria, and also South Africa, and discovered all sorts of practices that people shared. So, for example, if they had stock with a shelf life that was going to expire, they would quickly put together a promotion and distribute the stock out of their warehouses to their stores and their dealers, basically passing on the problem of disposal to their customers in order to make money. And when confronted in the circle, as more and more people shared how uncomfortable they felt with this, so the leadership came to see that it simply had to change, and that a more long-lasting, more sustainable business could only come from changing that sort of practice. So we're saying really that circle work does yield fantastic outcomes. And if we can get people involved in that, you can make a huge difference. I think some of the pressing needs that I see in society and in business today are there's so much trauma around at both the individual level and at the collective level. And that trauma comes from things like uncertainty and fear and so on. And we all know about that, so I'm not going to dwell on it or enlarge. But this is where it's so necessary for connection and circles and a community to come into play and for stories to be shared. I had a little dog that I loved, and it was knocked over by a passing car in front of me. And it was a horrific incident. He was like part of family. And I was traumatized for months after that, years even. Kept on having flashbacks, felt listless, couldn't focus, blamed myself. So trauma can really be disenabling, inhibiting, and there's just far too much of it about. So, one of the first steps is to recognize we don't have all the answers ourselves. We can't do it all ourselves. And a little community that's really there for each other, as happens within circles, it is a great way to go. And it's a great way to start shifting culture, to start shifting values, symbols, norms, behaviors, agreeing them, sharing them, and then shifting them. So here are the 10 tips that I'd like to share with you regarding running successful story circles. The first one is for the leader to let go and let the people who know what the work's about do the work. Let go, let it happen. Show faith and trust in your people. The second guideline is to allow people to discuss and answer questions to do with taboo subjects. So whether it's politics or religion or things that we don't talk about in this business, sometimes to do with diversity and so on, to let them discuss those topics because they're adult and because they can be relied on to discuss them responsibly under the right facilitation. The next tip I would give you is to leave behind a meeting culture. It's not about meetings, it's about a social construct where people are not trying to score points, they're not trying to establish their standing and their status, they're not competing with each other, they're part of a family in a way. A very important point, number 4, is that the facilitation of circle work requires a very special way of doing it. Quite simply to be as unobtrusive as possible, to be invisible and let people get on with it. Now, of course, there's certain rules, and of course one has to step in sometimes under exceptional circumstances, but by and large, don't try to steer and guide and facilitate, just let it be. And that way you get the best results. Related to that is being patient. You have to allow people to get used to working in circles, used to working in a different way, and let it happen in its own time, not force the issue. You have to create a safe place, a place where there's respect, unconditional positive regard. People aren't afraid to speak out. And that's an absolute imperative. Another important aspect is to invoke both left and right brain activity. So circles aren't simply about information, they're also about feelings. And when people share how they feel about things, that's often far more valuable than just the information that they deal with. So it's knowledge and it's also feelings. Another tip I would offer is to move away from peer norms and ideas so that people can engage with new and different possibilities. For example, the right choice of values. So let's have values, not the old big Latin words like integrity and responsibility and accountability, but let's think about love and creativity. Maybe a good one's curiosity, because curiosity leads to discovery, leads to creativity, leads to innovation. So instead of innovation, why not have a value like curiosity? And that's the sort of stuff that comes out in circle conversations. Another thing that happens is that people discover that they have multiple identities. And there's an I identity and a we identity that's multi-layered. And discovering that that exists, and beyond that there's lots of common ground, allows one to move through the whole diversity spectrum, equity to inclusion to belonging to really bonding. And then the 10th and last tip I would offer is to plan to shift about changing values or perhaps the most important part of any culture. And to change values, you have to change the people. So values have to become virtues. And virtues come about when the people have agreed and they've shared certain behavior norms. And that's an important part of the implementation process. So I'll end on that note by saying that it's been so encouraging to see that people who undergo the experience of circle work become firm advocates. And as more and more of that happens within an organization, you reach a tipping point for the culture shift. So story circles then are the ultimate people-centric route to shifting culture. And I'll end with, I think this is the last slide. Yes. If anyone wants to know more about the subject, you can contact either myself or Artem. There's a 22-page booklet on using circles to shift culture. That's available for anyone who wants it. And I think that's it, Artem. Thank you very much.
So before we move into the Q&A part, I can see Graham Williams is here with us today. And yes, he is ready for a Q&A. Graham, please join me on air, just like before. And you can have the booklet by pressing the button that's on the screen right now. It's like a banner. Graham, I'm really looking forward to hearing you. And there is a question to you right away. So do join me. Thank you so much. Guys, let's share our fire with Graham, who did a terrific pre-recording for us and gave us the power of story circles. Graham, so right away, a question for you, my friend. Story circles are created for one idea or could be created for different ideas, asks Tatiana.
Yes, it's always best to use a group of equals, a peer group, if you like, and for them to handle one topic at a time. So that ensures focus, and it ensures sharing that's to the point and enables the group to do its task and for the relationships to be built. So you can run a number of circles at the same time within an organization, but within each specific circle, it's better to stick with a single task and a single question, or maybe two carefully crafted questions.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, if you have any more questions, go for them in the chat. It says that this link for your file is not opening. Well, you can always email Graham at this email that I gave you, Irina, and Graham will gladly send you this file, so no problem there. So I'll just stop the banner if it doesn't show. No problem. Okay. Oh, Tatiana says it's opening. Great. Graham, while we are waiting for more questions, here's one from me, and you know what's coming. Since stories form the cultures, and cultures shapes the stories we tell, what came first in your opinion? Just a quick insight from you.
Yeah, I'm going to fudge my answer. It's a closed loop circle.
I know, but we're keeping score, so
yes.
story's actually winning, if we could say so.
Okay. I think what happens is this. Story is a contributor, not a panacea. So as the culture changes and people observe that, and their war stories and stories of customer service improving and that sort of stuff, so it reinforces what's happening and the culture continues to change. Sometimes you have to do it the other way around and feed in stories of what has happened, maybe even in other companies, and what people can aspire to. And as that begins to reside in people's mind, so also the culture begins to change. So I'm going to continue to fudge my answer. It's a bit of both.
Okay, I'll take it from you. Okay. We have another question coming from Tatiana. She says that a format of mastermind, it's a circle of people who give each other ideas about problems and solving them, is really popular today. So people often go out of this mastermind in different thoughts and feelings that are not so positive, so to speak. So is there a way story circles can help mend this process of mastermind to make it more, comfortable for people?
Yeah. I think if one can grasp that within circles, relationship is the thing that really happens so that the task can happen. So relationship comes before task. I don't like the word mastermind because one, it reduces feelings and emotions and spirituality to the mind only, and master implies superiority. And it almost, the title almost goes against one of the foundational things of a circle is that people are vulnerable, share, and are themselves with all of their imperfections, and they discover beauty in those imperfections, and they're not trying to be clever, they're trying to share together. So I'm not sure if that answered the question directly.
That's perfect.
Okay.
Tatiana says, wow, thank you. So I think you nailed it. We have a question from one of our speakers, Vladimir Duncan. And Tatiana says actually that your answer gave her goosebumps. So I think you nailed it. Vladimir is asking that he's using some artifacts like a staff or a campfire. So maybe some artifacts you use for story circles.
Yes. I keep it simple, and for me the word story also includes image, symbol, artifact, metaphor, ritual. They are all stories. So I think that's wonderful to be doing that. And it's also wonderful to be open to the idea that we don't need such strict definitions of everything.
Graham,
And we use story as we, yeah.
I think what Vladimir meant was physical things, like he places a fire and holds a staff. So maybe some physical things you use in the process to facilitate it.
Okay. The first thing that comes to mind is that during our story circles, we use a Native American talking stick. So the person doing the talking at that moment has the power to talk. Everyone else has the power to listen. When the stick is passed to the next person who's able to talk, that power shifts, and the circle itself is a sacred, powerful space. So the ritual of using a talking stick actually starts to introduce a different culture, a culture of listening and sharing and being vulnerable.
Lovely. And you actually nailed to answer Tatiana's last question. But we still have one question left, and the time is running out. So I will be moving to the next speaker. And for now, Graham, thank you so much for being here, despite what's happening, despite the power outages, despite everything. You are brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Artem, and thank you for putting this together, for weaving peace and togetherness at this very difficult time. Thank you.